Hello and welcome back to another YouTube video. Today I'm going to be updating all my Clash tier list to 13.7. So if you enjoy the content, like and subscribe, and let's get into it. To begin with, I want to add Azir to the top lane tier list. So Azir got some buffs this patch to put him in a better spot in the mid lane. And as a consequence of this, or a benefit, if you see it as that, Azir is actually doing really well as a top laner. There is a high chance Azir, in pro at least, could be overpowered in the top lane. But for the moment, I'm going to leave him in the B tier because I don't want to get too far ahead of where he actually is, because it might just be people who are like better of a champion or more niche, like a smaller player base who are playing it top lane. But as of the moment, Azir doing quite well in the top lane, so definitely keep that on your mind. There's a high chance Azir could be really good, and if you play Azir, try him in the top lane. Alistar is actually going to move up into the D tier. He received some nice buffs, which overall helped him out in the support role, but actually benefited him more in the top lane. Base armor and base health will benefit a champ in the top lane, so quite nice for him. Yasuo, I'm going to move up to the C tier. Yasuo, just overall with the buffs, it helped him a very relatively small amount, but probably needed to be moved up into the C tier. He provides good flex potential, and if you're good at him, then definitely recommend playing him. But if you're someone who doesn't have a lot of practice of a champion, he's a fairly high mastery champ, so I would avoid playing him. Rammus, I'm actually going to move down to the C tier. But Rammus nerfs really hit top lane Rammus. If you're playing someone who builds a lot of armor, just play Malphite. If Malphite's banned, then flex towards a different tank, something like an Ornn or a Cho'Gath or a Sion. Always work quite well. Rammus has just been nerfed to the point in the top lane where you're going to get really hard punished, and overall the reward for his scaling is no longer gonna be as rewarding for being punished in the early game. Olaf, I'm gonna move down to the A tier. Olaf just received some relatively small nerfs. 5 damage off the Q at all ranks and 10% off the passive. Just tapped him down a tier. He's still relatively good, and in the spots where you want to pick him, he's still going to be one of the best, but not as strong as he used to be. Lee, I'm actually going to remove from the top lane tier list. He's not really played that much. He got nerfed this patch, and overall, I'm just going to remove him. So, but one champ I want to move on to the Z tier is Malphite. With other champs just being kind of nerfed in the top lane, Malphite has continued to gain more power, and this has led him to be a Z tier pick. He is just outright one of the easiest and strongest top laners in the game at the moment. There are answers to him, don't get me wrong. Things like Silas, Mordekaiser, Rumble will still run Malphite over. He does lose to some matchups if played incorrectly as well, so just be wary of that. But for the most part, Malphite does stand kind of head above the rest of the pack, so yep. Jungle, moving on, is actually going to be changed a slight bit. A couple of the champs within the jungle are nerfed quite heavily this patch. Things like Wukong, I'm actually going to move down to the B tier. Wukong received the biggest of all the nerfs in the jungle. He lost a lot of power within his late game skirmishing and a bit of early game clear power, and that just hurt him a decent amount. He's still like high B, if anything, but not as strong as the A tier champs, and relatively average compared to the rest of the jungle pool. Graves, I'm going to leave in the B tier. The buffs didn't do a huge amount. If anything, his win rate lowered because more people are trying out the crit builds, which is still just worse in the jungle from what I saw. You can go crit though. They are coming up to be relatively even, but the Leaf Hour is mostly still going to be the way to go, so I'm going to leave him in the B tier. Vi, got nerfed quite heavily this patch, so I'm going to put her in the Z tier. Yeah, she's broken. She's really, really overpowered if you go Eclipse. Make sure you're going your high AD lethality builds. She might be the best jungler in the game. She has really good ult setup, and her damage is really, really high after the AD ratio buff. So keep it in mind. Vi, really, really broken jungler at the moment. Just don't go Divine Syndra. Go Eclipse. Kha'Zix, I'm going to leave in the B tier. He received some changes this patch. It was powered down, but for his Q max build, for his Q evolve builds, it was relatively power neutral in a way. So yeah, I'm going to leave him in the B tier. He probably needs a bit more than just adjustments. Sejuani, I'm going to move down to the B tier. Received some nerfs this patch, and overall, it just hurt her reliability and her objective taking, but still a relatively good champ, so going to leave her in the B tier. Nunu, actually going to move down to the A tier. I kind of I had him in the S tier pre-XP buffs towards the jungle. Since the XP buffs, it benefited a lot of the other champs, whereas Nunu benefited from the high amounts of ganks and just the gank meta. And now we're kind of transitioning out of that. He's no longer as strong as he used to be. He's still a good champion, but just not S tier worthy. Kayn is going to be in the S tier as a replacement to Nunu. Kayn is really strong at the moment. Both blue and red form are really good. But pick from where you need to. And yeah, he's really powerful in those regards. Playing red, really good tank shredder. Cleaver being really strong at the moment. Eclipse I would recommend over Gore Drinker. I just don't think Gore Drinker is a great item as of the moment. It does need some buffs, so I'd avoid that, go Eclipse. And if you're going blue, Eclipse, Prowlers both work quite nicely. Nocturne, I'm also going to move up into the S tier. His reliability and just overall damage at the moment is quite high. You want to go for lethality builds. You can go Stride Breaker if you want more util, but the lethality builds help him snowball, keep him relevant within the game, and you just want to make sure you're closing out games early on. If you're letting games drag on, he does fall off and become kind of bad, but if you're closing out games early, he's really strong. Lee, I'm going to move down to the B tier. The nerfs overall, the nerfs this patch obviously now hurts his E and his auto attacks because it's not a total damage on the E. The armor, losing a bit of armor as well, gonna have a champion, so just gonna move him down to the B tier. For mid lane, there were a couple of changes here. Azir is actually going to move up from the F tier to the C tier. The buffs this patch were really nice towards him, so he benefited from that. He's still below average in the mid lane, but definitely if you're good at this chap and you're high at elo, then he scales with elo still. But yeah, he's not doing too bad. Katarina, I'm going to leave in the A tier. The changes were relatively power neutral. Honestly, if you're going the Protobout Nash's variant of Katarina, she's probably bordering S tier if you play the champion. But for the moment, as most people don't play Katarina, I'm going to leave her in the A tier. She's good. Just make sure you're going the correct builds in the games where you need to go them. Veigar, I'm going to move down to the B tier. Never mind, I've already moved him down to the B tier. Yeah, the changes fairly power neutral, but a slight nerf towards higher ranks. He's still going to be stronger when you can get those levels, so definitely more low elo skewed. If you're the lower rank you go, the stronger Veigar is going to be. He does a lot of damage. Overall, later on in the game, his damage is higher. Earlier on, though, it's going to be down, so keep that in mind. Annie is staying in the Z tier. The nerfs just weren't enough towards mid lane Annie. She's still a really reliable pick, really good scaling, really good damage, and overall just going to leave her in the Z tier because of it. Anivia, Cassie didn't really get affected by the rower changes as much, and for that, I'm just going to leave them in the Z tier as well. So moving on, ADCs. For ADC, let's quickly save this and then go down. Yasuo gonna move up into the B tier. The buffs were nice the buffs were very QOL. I mean, they were buffs, but it didn't do a huge amount. So yeah, Yasuo is gonna move up into the B tier because he is still a relatively good ADC. You can pair him with Senna, and he has some relatively strong. I moved the wrong champ up. Nice. And he's still relatively strong, so keep it in mind. Kalista is staying in the C tier. The buffs did hardly anything. Zeri is actually going to move down to the B tier. Her nerfs did do enough to put her down here. I originally put her down to the A tier after the Lethal Tempo, Bloodline, and Bloodthirster nerfs, but since they've nerfed her again, I'm going to move that down to the B tier. B tier, of course, being a very average tier for most champions. And in turn, I'm going to move MF up. I think MF has found a better spot after her nerfs. Well, nerfs back along. She's gradually risen back up as other ADCs around her have been nerfed and the overall kind of game has changed. So MF, relatively easy champ, relatively strong at the moment. Pick her if you need to. That's mostly it for supports. Mostly it for ADCs. Keep in mind, Veigar is nerfed for ADC, but it actually didn't do as much as they probably hoped for. So maybe we'll see some more Veigar nerfs. But for the moment, still a good pairing with Senna. A lot of these champs can work standalone. Things like Karthus, Seraphine, Veigar, still Z tier champs in the bot lane if you're playing them. And support, only a couple of changes here. Alistar staying in the A tier. The buffs really didn't do too much for support Alistar. They obviously didn't increase a threshold of autos. I mean, they're buffs, so they're welcome. Fresh gonna move down to the A tier. The Q losing the CD return on it does hurt him a bit, so he does go down to the A tier because of this. And Annie gonna move down to the S tier. The nerfs obviously targeted towards support Annie and the Emax, and in turn falls down to the S tier. Ricard still being by far and away the best support in the game at the moment. Seda does work really well with good pairings, so keep that in mind. And overall, those are the changes. There's not a huge amount going on within the tier list. I'll quickly show these on the screen. So top lane is looking like this. I'll move it like this. No F tier champs as of the moment. Just make sure you're playing Malphite in games where he's good. A lot of the tanks which have been buffed to a point where they're really strong or just have map pressure, really good. Clyde, flexibility. Drax, just really good dueling. For jungle, a lot of the higher tier ones are really good Eclipse users. All 3 of these can use Eclipse. 4 of these can use Eclipse. Nocturne can go the Assassin build, but you want to go like Showbreaker, Axiom. Those 2 work as well. Things like Akrim really work quite nicely with lethality builds as well at the moment. Yi, obviously, doing quite well. You can reuse this champ in higher elo as well. For mid lane, it's mostly still just going to be 2 of the Roa users. Cassie and Nivea still doing really strong. Annie, obviously, still doing really strong at the moment. Cannon, kind of sleeper. Pantheon, probably best ADC, AD champ in the mid lane. And Tristana, really powerful in certain matchups, so keep that in mind. For bot lane, Twitch, still really, really good as a 1v9 carry. Ashe got buffed very recently, really good. Jinx, also the same. And Tristana, also still really good. Good flexibility as well. And a lot of the Senna pairings are really strong at the moment. Xayah is borderline S tier. I'm just not putting her up here because a lot of these champs do kind of outperform her. And for support, Rakan, yeah, stands alone as being the best support in the game. Senna, still really strong with her pairings. Annie support, still really good. The Reflect being really valuable. Tarek, still a really good enabler. Pairs quite nicely with certain ADCs, things like Nyla, and a lot of jugglers. And Blitzcrank, really, really valuable. The hook has a lot of value, along with a lot of the other hook champs. So, yeah. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.